Hello and welcome!
Hello and welcome!
My name is Cinnamon Roll, and I'm building a school bus into my full-time permanent home. Now, this channel is called Cinnamon Roll Adventures, and it wouldn't really be living up to its name if I didn't include at least an adventure or two at some point. So this past week, I went on a much-needed vacation to a little place in Ontario called Falls Reserve. As its name implies, it is home to multiple small waterfalls, though the river was fairly dry this time of year. There was lots to do, like swimming under the falls, and of course, lots of hiking. Now, despite how I look, I do enjoy a good long walk from time to time. I enjoy looking at nature, and the rhythm of footfalls on the ground helps me to think. And of course, naturally, one of the many things I thought about was the school bus project. My next steps, how the channel's doing, and a lot of other things. So I'm happy to be back working on the bus, and I'm pumped about the future. So let's dive right in. Last year I did a lot of work up high, especially on the front end of the bus where the sloped roof is. The problem is that working on a ladder isn't particularly safe, and standing on the front cowling over the engine was starting to form some stress cracks in the fiberglass. So I decided to build some scaffolding. Now, I didn't make this overly fancy, and I just used whatever materials I had on hand. I first measured the front cowling to see what minimum height I would need the platform to be. I then grabbed some wood and measured the minimum width. That established, I began assembling. I'm not going to pretend like this was a pretty process. It wasn't. But it's functional, and that's all I really needed. Now that I had that done, I could begin work on the bodywork in earnest. My first task was to remove the front flashers, cover them, and clean up the bodywork on the front section. I started by unscrewing the flashers. And can I just take a moment to complain about the US standard for screws? Phillips? Seriously? The moment they slip, they're garbage. Do better, US of A. Anyways, once the flashers were out, I widened the holes that the screws were in so that they would accept rivets. I then sanded the surfaces around where the flasher covers would go to even out the surfaces and to remove any dirt and grime. I did the same thing to the other side, and then I did some CAD, that is, cardboard aided design. I needed to figure out what size the flasher covers needed to be, so I made a template out of cardboard. This took me a few tries, but I did manage to figure it out. Once I was satisfied with the template, I found some sheet metal, and then transferred the template over. After that, I cut out the flasher covers with a jigsaw. And of course, a jigsaw will leave the edge jagged, so I cleaned them up with the grinder and a flap disc. I repeated this process 3 more times because there are 4 flashers to cover, after all. And then I went ahead and installed them. First, I test fit the covers. And then I drilled some more holes for the rivets. I cleaned all the burrs off the holes with the sander, and then repeated the process for the other side. I then temporarily taped the covers in place so that I could drill the holes in them. I applied a generous bead of seam sealer around the holes, and then riveted the panels into place. And this is what it looked like after the first day. And I know it looks really rough, but just wait, it gets better. I came back a few days later and first used a wire wheel to clean up some of the welds on the driver's side. I painted it black to temporarily keep it from rusting, and then I turned my attention to the mess that was the front end of this bus. First, I used the flap disc to clean up some of the residue left from where I removed the original marker lights, and then I used the sander to smooth everything out. After that, a quick coat of black primer revealed any scratches or defects that would have to be fixed later. I continued to alternate between the grinder and the sander and the paint, removing any bumps or ridges that I found. Now, of course, I couldn't paint over stickers, so unfortunately this cool bus decal had to go. I did this by using a heat gun and a variety of different scrapers, followed by a pass with an eraser wheel. So if you're planning to remove any stickers from your project, it doesn't have to be a bus, any kind of project that you're removing stickers from, eraser wheels are a cheap, effective way to get rid of any sticky residue left over. That said, this is time consuming, so you have to have some patience, and there is a bit of a technique to it that took me a bit to figure out. Once the sticker was off, I went back to sanding everything smooth, and then I gave everything a good solid coat of black paint. Once everything was evenly coated, I took a tube of seam sealer and ran a bead along the drip channel because I removed the rubber sealant from it earlier when I was grinding and sanding the surfaces, so I needed to reseal everything to prevent water leakage into the bus. Now there is still some bodywork to be done on the front here, but I will do that at the same time that I work on the slope section later. For now, I needed to turn my attention to the rear of the bus, but before I could do that, I needed to make a way for me to move the scaffolding around. So, I installed some wheels. This allowed me to drag the scaffolding to the rear of the bus. And as I did to the front, so too did I do to the back. I won't go into detail about this because it's basically the same process, so I've time-lapsed it for you. And just like that, about 8 hours of work is condensed into about 45 seconds. So one of the things that has to be done on this bus is painting it a different color. I'm thinking something like fire engine red or maybe a slightly darker variant of that. Before I can even think about doing that though, I need to remove all of the decals. Is it decals or decals? I don't know, whatever. So that means all the lettering, numbers, and reflective tape need to come off. I use the same method as I did earlier with a combination of heat gun, scraper, and eraser wheel chucked up into a drill. I will also time-lapse this because, let's be honest, you probably don't need to hear every detail about how I did this. So instead, I'll tell you a story from camping. So, I'm the type of person that, if I don't sleep well, I'm miserable the next day. For me, it's tantamount to torture. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just remember that one of the methods that the Viet Cong employed to torture US soldiers was sleep deprivation. I get headaches very easily, and often they cross into migraine territory. So it's with this in mind that I did everything I could to make camping as comfortable for myself as possible. I even went as far as to having a cot with a thick mattress on top and a fan to keep air circulating in the tent as I slept. So you can imagine my annoyance when, on a Saturday night, one of the neighbors decided to set up a tent at 11:30 p.m. This in and of itself wasn't the end of the world because I was on vacation, so going to bed at midnight wasn't out of the question. The problems began when the neighbors in question continued to make noise all the way until 2 a.m. Now you might be thinking that I'm exaggerating a bit here, but when a car alarm goes off not once, not twice, but 3 times in the span of an hour and a half, it begins to grate on you. That, in combination with the laughing, the cheering, the clapping, and the constant shine of flashlights on my tent, led to me eventually sending off a very unhappy email to the park staff, followed by a very irate cinnamon roll hopping into his car and driving home just so he could sleep in his own bed. I fell asleep at about 3 a.m. Now you're probably wondering why I didn't confront the neighbors. Well, if you know me, you know that I am a very non-confrontational person. I was also irate enough that, had I gone over to yell at them, I probably would have begun throwing some fists, and that would have ended with me getting kicked out of the park. So I cooled my head, went home, and the next day I called park staff to complain. I'm happy to say that park security spoke with the neighbors, and from that point on I didn't have any other issues with those neighbors. So yeah, the story had a happy ending. I enjoyed the rest of my vacation, and cooler heads prevailed. And it's with that story that I will end this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing. It's by no means necessary, but it does help this channel grow, and I would be very grateful. Thank you so much for watching, enjoy your day, and I'll see you next time.